Welcome to Northern Institute's Social and Policy Research Platter for CDU Research Week 2020. My name is Katrina Britnell and I'm the Partnerships Coordinator with Northern Institute. Firstly, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet today. For us at Northern Institute in Darwin, it is the Larrakia we pay our respects to. We also pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us online today. Please keep your microphones muted, which I think you are forced to do, throughout the webinar, and please keep questions to the end of the webinar time so they all come up in sequence. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sigurd Dyrting and Fiona Shalley, who are demographers at the Northern Institute, to present on the Territory and Me survey. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Sigurd Dyrting. I'm joined today by my colleague Fiona Shalley. We are both part of the Demography and Growth Planning team at the Northern Institute. We specialise in understanding the causes and consequences of population change, with particular application to sparsely populated areas in general and the Northern Territory in particular. And we do that in order to inform policy and local decisions. As part of the Northern Territory Government's population growth strategy, there is a focus to sponsor ongoing research into the drivers of population change. As part of that focus, we were commissioned to undertake a survey called the Territory into the factors that lead people to move to the territory. So what we're going to do today is to give a little bit of an overview of some of the results that we found. Most of you are probably aware that for the last 10 years, the Northern Territory has been experiencing a period of slowing growth and recently population decline. And to understand why this is happening, it is helpful to decompose how our population changes into its three main categories: natural increase, net overseas migration, and net interstate migration. Natural increase is the increase in our population due to births minus the decrease due to deaths. Net overseas migration is the increase in our population due to people moving over from overseas to the Northern Territory minus the decrease due to people moving from the Northern Territory to go overseas. Net interstate migration is the increase in our population from people moving from down south up to the Northern Territory, minus the people from Northern Territory moving down south. What we have here is a picture of these three components over the last 10 years. So along the x-axis, we have time measured in quarters of a year. And along the y-axis, the number of people added or subtracted from the Northern Territory's population due to each of these components. The blue line is the line showing natural increase. We see that for the last 10 years it has been positive and largely stable. The orange line shows net overseas migration. We see that for the first half of this period it was positive, but over the second half it began to decrease and to become more erratic. The purple line, dashed line, shows net interstate migration. We see at the beginning of the era it was small and positive, but has over the course of 10 years steadily declined so that now it is large and negative. So you can understand our present situation as being characterised by an increasing outflow of people to move to the southern states and a decrease in the quality and the stability of our overseas migration into the Northern Territory. Now, it's worth pointing out that the current era of lower than average growth is not new. In this diagram, I'm plotting net interstate migration and growth rate as a function of time from 1979 to 2018. So we have on the y-axis to the left, net interstate migration per annum, with the blue bars showing periods of net inflow and the red bars showing periods of net outflow. Along the y-axis on the right, we have our annual growth rate. So you can see that periods of sustained interstate outflow and the concurrent lower than average growth rate have occurred twice before in our history since self-government. Once in the mid-80s to the mid-90s, and then from the late 90s to the mid-2000s. But you'll see that our current period is characterised by both its duration and its depth. We see that we're currently being 10 years into a period of net interstate outflow, and that is longer than the two previous periods. And furthermore, it shows no signs of abating. And the depth is greater. The numbers of outflows per annum exceed now anything that we've seen since self-government. Now, in previous work commissioned by the Northern Territory Government, we highlighted that there was no silver bullet to this. There's no single policy that we thought the government could implement that would return the territory back to growth. Rather, we thought that a suite of policies targeted to specific subpopulations would have a greater chance of succeeding. Now, when you try to understand why people are moving away from the territory, census data is the best data you've got, but it only tells you so much. It tells you how many people are moving, their ages, and so forth, but it doesn't tell you the reasons why they're moving. So in tackling the problem of tailoring policies to specific subpopulations, we first needed to create a database of people that were moving or thinking of moving to the territory or thinking of moving away from the territory, linking those intentions to the reasons why they were moving and certain socioeconomic variables. And I'd like to hand over now to Fiona Shalley to talk to you about how we designed and implemented that survey.
Thanks, Sigurd. So, as Sigurd has beautifully introduced, our population trends tell us that the overall territory population is in decline and has been in decline for a while. It also tells us something about the basic demographics of the groups coming and going. But as he also said, it doesn't tell us the personal motivations about why. And this is the grail in our quest. Why are less people arriving, particularly from interstate, and more people leaving? Are the reasons different for different subpopulations? For example, people who are older or mid-career, or people who have migrated from overseas, people with particular qualifications, for instance, or particular connections to the territory. So these are the sorts of questions that form the basis of our survey development. But we also look to academic literature associated with migration to like places, so to sort of northern areas and more sparsely populated, to understand the characteristics that may influence decisions to come. And this tells us that life stage has a very important influence on migration decisions, and behaviours are more readily influenced during transition from one life stage to the next. It also tells us that people actually spend a lot of time weighing up the relative attractiveness of their current location compared to possible destinations and ask themselves, is moving worth the risk? And certainly economic conditions in the NT compared to the rest of Australia are an important determinant in deciding to move, but the link is more complex than just looking at comparative unemployment rates, for instance. Other things are at play. So at the beginning of our survey development, we really needed to consider a number of things to properly design a good survey. Firstly, who do we want to participate? And of course, we certainly want to hear from current Territorians and their experience of living in the Territory. But getting to former Territorians was also really important because they had a lived experience and then they had made the decision to move. And then there are those who are potential Territorians, people who are visiting or perhaps thinking about moving here. What do they already know about the Territory? How do they perceive the Territory as a migration destination? And why do they want to come? So in terms of the survey content, as Sigurd said, demographics and socioeconomic influences behaviours. So we want to understand sex, age, country of birth, but also if they're employed, what's their job, who do they work for, what's their highest education qualification. We also want to understand the pull factors. So what is attracting people here? Is it a job? Is it for education? Is it that they want to balance their lifestyle? Perhaps it's the landscapes that are attracting people or the diversity of culture. Who do they move with? Did they get any financial support or incentive to come? And what Territory attributes do they think would encourage more people to come and live here? We also want to know about retention. So when people come, what makes them stay? Perhaps how long they've lived here already. Do they own their home or have a mortgage on their home? Are they satisfied with their job? Do they feel safe? Are they volunteering? Have they got children or grandchildren already in the Territory? And finally, why did people leave? Or perhaps why are people thinking about leaving and what things would help them stay? We developed a survey using SurveyMonkey, which provides a great online platform that can tailor the questionnaire to different devices, so PCs, tablets, phones, because we wanted it to be easy for people to fill in. We also wanted them to be able to easily branch through the questionnaire so they're only answering questions appropriate to their circumstances, and we want them to be able to share it easily with others. So in our implementation, the first thing all university researchers have to do is consider ethics, which required us to explain why we're collecting the data in plain English and get consent from people before they even participated to say we can use their information and their experiences. And this was built into the survey design. The next thing to think about was a comprehensive communication strategy. How do we get the survey out there and how do we maximise the opportunities for people to participate? So our first focus was on some web pages created for the survey. So people could go there and access information about it, but also easily send a survey link to other people. We used our own research networks through the university and through government, as well as some online social groups, for instance, Darwin Have a Whinge, and other Facebook groups that are associated with the Territory. And also we wanted to get a bit of media coverage, so we talked to local radio, and the NT News picked us up, which gave us a bit of bump. And finally, we added that little bit of incentive for people who agreed to leave their contact details. First prize was a return trip between Alice or Darwin and any other capital city. So that would entice some people to participate, but also to leave their details. And this helped us with the last bit, which was thinking forward about future research. And that's the potential to reconnect with our respondents, with their permission, of course. And all this came together to give us over 5,200 people participating in the survey, which makes it one of the largest ever population surveys in the Territory.
Once the survey was complete and we had these 5,200 odd respondents, you're then faced with the problem of having a lot of data of different categories And so the problem is, how do you approach summarising that data and extracting meaningful information from it? One thing we thought was a good start was to look at retention. Our interstate migration is characterised by very large flows both into the territory and out of the territory. So we seem to have less of a problem attracting people, more of a problem retaining them. So the first thing we looked at was the retention rate of people currently living in the Northern Territory. We did that by through a question which asked people within the next 2 years, they expect to remain in the territory or to leave it. From that, we could calculate a retention rate. That is, the number of people who expected to leave, the number of people who expected to stay, divided by the number of people who expected to stay, plus the number of people who expected to leave. Now, one of the things about any type of migration, whether it's interstate or international, is that there is a strong age component to it always. So for this reason, we divided our list of participants into 4 categories depending upon their age. We had the early career category. These were respondents from 18 to 29. There's the mid-career category. These were respondents in their 30s and 40s. And the pre-retiree category, these are people in their 50s. And the retiree category, people aged 60 or over. Now, the labels we gave each category, I used terminology related to participation in the labour force, but I stress that these are really life stage categories, categories that depend upon the age. So what we see here is a graph of the retention rate for each of these life stages. And we see that retention rates increase as you go through the life stage. Now, the rather low retention rate for the early career respondents is concerning, because the Northern Territory has proportionally large amount of people in this age group, and together they account for roughly a quarter of the people leaving the Territory to move down south. Now, the retiree group, although it has a large retention rate, the largest of the 4 life stages, it is also important because the Territory's population is ageing. So although the retention rate is high, we will expect in the future to see more people moving into this age group, and so there will be an increase in the outflow of these people. Now, within any of these life stages, there is a great variety of characteristics of the people. So the good thing about this survey is that it allows us to look into each life stage and analyse retention rates by particular characteristics of people, with the aim of trying to characterise those Territory residents who are most likely to stay. When we did that, we found that retention rate depended significantly on a range of factors, such as where you were born, whether it was overseas or in Australia, your home ownership status, did you own your home, or were you in the process of owning versus not owning? The level of your education attainment, your labour force participation, your length of stay in the Territory, and also whether you had children in the Territory versus having children interstate. So what we see here is 2 of these breakdowns. The first one, the one on your left, shows retention rate within each life stage broken down by whether you're born in Australia or born overseas. So we see across all life stages, those Territorians that were born overseas had always a higher retention rate, and particularly so in the early career segment. We also see in the diagram on the right a breakdown of retention rates by home ownership. Once again, we see a very strong signal right across each life stage that those people who own their own home or in the process of purchasing their own home have significantly higher retention rates. Now, those people who said that they were thinking of leaving within 2 years or 5 years, they were asked for the main reason they were thinking of leaving. And what you see is a frequency breakdown of the responses for each life stage. Now, in this question, people were given roughly 15 pre-coded choices to choose from, and as well as a free text field where they could specify an alternative reason. So after we analysed it, what strikes you when you first look at these pictures is that there's always a broad range of reasons that people are thinking of leaving that seem to be common across all age groups. But when we did a factor analysis, we found that most of that variation in age could be attributed to two factors. The first factor, the primary factor, we call the youth maturity factor. The second factor, the secondary one, we call the established transitioning factor. Now, the youth maturity factor is one that increases in strength as you age through that life stage. So it's smallest for the early career segment and largest for the retiree segment. Now, what you see here is we've ordered the reasons for moving by their weighting on this youth maturity factor. And what strikes you is that the frequency distribution as you move across each life stage begins to shift up. Now, the importance of this is that it allows us to identify reasons that we can call youthful reasons for thinking of leaving the territory, such as leaving to find work, leaving for education reasons, or leaving because of expensive housing. But at the other end, we can also talk about relatively mature reasons for leaving the territory, such as leaving for retirement, leaving to be closer to your children, or leaving for access to better healthcare. But there is a second component that's also important. This is the established transitioning component. This is weakest for established life stages, the pre-retiree and the mid-career, and then begins to strengthen as you move into transitioning age groups, the early career and retiree group. This second factor is important because it explains variations that aren't accounted for by age. And we can see two of the most important reasons, or two prominent reasons for leaving the territory are both related to wealth or income. One is you're leaving because you feel that the territory's economy has a poor outlook, or you're leaving because you feel that the cost of living is too high. Now, what is interesting about these two reasons for leaving is that their relative importance were different depending on whether you were in an established lifestyle stage or a transitioning one. If you were in an established life stage, if you were in mid-career or pre-retiree, you weighted the economic outlook more than whether the cost of living was high. But conversely, if you were in a transitioning group, the early career or the retiree, you did the opposite. You weighted the cost of living more than the economy. The second reason why this established transitioning factor is important is that with these two factors, we can characterise precisely the four age groups. Early career, young, transitioning. Mid-career, young, established. Pre-retiree, mature, established. And retiree, mature, transitioning. So once we have a characterisation of these three life stages, we are then able to tailor policies to their various aspects. I'll hand over to Fiona now for concluding remarks and future blisters.
Thanks, Sigurd. So Sigurd has ably taken us through the survey's key findings based on where people are at in their life course. And maybe some of those results were not that unexpected. And this is good. Researchers often don't want things to be difficult to explain. They don't want things to turn out different from what they expect. But the very important aspect of these results is that they provide the evidence on which to base future policies around targeting population growth that can be nuanced to each of those life stages. As researchers, we have a big responsibility to let people know about our research outcomes, particularly to those who took the time to complete the survey and tell us all their stories, which were amazing. And it took people on average 15 minutes, but I'm sure it took some people longer than that. We have already provided a summary report to all of our respondents and also a summary report to the government. Our results have influenced an ongoing government campaign to prompt new arrivals to update their Medicare details, which the ABS uses as a key source of information for population updates between censuses. It's this population number that directly influences the NT share of the GST. And this was based on one of the responses to one of our survey questions. And the results have also been used in the NT rebound scenarios that government's talking about at the moment. We have also published 3 research briefs which focus on some subpopulations that have been identified in previous research as very important to population growth. And there's a link on our survey web pages that you can go to and you can have a read of these later. And these provide much more detail. So the territoryandme.cdu.edu.au and just click on publications. So these research briefs cover results for the growing multicultural communities who appear to be sticking better than other parts of the population. There's one on the seniors population, which is growing faster than other population segments that Sigurd talked about before, and a paper investigating contemporary migration trends for Aboriginal Territorians, which are quite different from those of the rest of the NT population. So where to from here? The Territory and Me was a very successful survey, but it's what we call a cross-sectional survey. So it goes and it's a point in time covering a sample of the population. And that point in time was the 6 months of last year. Going back to what I earlier said, this survey now presents us the opportunity to reconnect with our respondents. And this is really an important time to do that. So COVID-19 has changed a whole lot of things, with people's decisions about where they actually want to live being just one of those. We want to know whether people's intention to leave or to come have changed because of the pandemic. And it also gives us an opportunity to check in and see how they're going in terms of their physical, mental and financial health. And wouldn't it be great if we could run a longitudinal survey from now so we're better able to understand people's migration decisions around calling the territory home? The survey results show that migration changes across the life course, and a longitudinal survey is designed to capture that change. The Territory has a population with significant churn, significant comings and goings, and it's likely to stay that way. It's highly seasonal and often volatile in terms of the big projects. So to be able to monitor migration sentiments would offer a continuing insight about how to direct policy and initiatives to attract and retain population into the future. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for attending and go to Katrina to ask if there are any questions.
Hi there. That was really interesting. That was very interesting, actually. I didn't realise I was a pre-retiree. So thanks for that. I actually don't have any questions, but if you do think of any later, then please get in contact. You can contact the Northern Institute at cdu.edu.au and I can pass on the question to the demography team. This presentation today is recorded and will be edited and uploaded to our Vimeo channels and to our YouTube channels. So keep an eye on our social media because we always post when those do go up on those channels. Thank you very much, Fiona and Sigurd, for sharing your research. I really appreciate it, and for joining us in celebrating Research Week at CDU.
Thanks, Katrina.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.